Joining us right now is Anish Chopra, the former White House Chief Technology Officer under President Obama, who is also the current president of CareJourney. That's a healthcare analytics firm. And thank you for being here today, Anish. It's good to see you.
Thanks for having me again.
I'll put the same question to you. After watching what happened yesterday, which one of these four companies and CEOs is in the most perilous position?
Well, it depends on the nature of the intervention. In my opinion, there may be a broader policy move afoot in Washington to revisit some key assumptions about what it means for competition policy. And if those assumptions change, it might have effect for the industry as a whole. And namely, this concept of a consumer harm standard for the basis of determining whether or not there's been a need for government intervention. And what you heard are individual case examples. I do think the conversation between Congresswoman Jayapal and Bezos did surface new information to the public that gives people a window into how these decisions are made, but they all are part of a broader fabric as to whether or not, just because the price for the service is apparently free on sort of the retail sense of the word, that there may be still harm, and as a result, triggering the potential for intervention. And if that judgment changes, then it has implications across tech as a whole.
Yeah, I mean, Amazon kind of Bezos wrapped himself in this whole idea that consumers love Amazon. They cited statistics saying 80% of customers love them. And right now, in particular, when there have been so many people trapped at home and relying on Amazon, that's absolutely true. But what you're suggesting is that that might not be enough, that your customers love you?
No. And so among the fundamental debates in Washington is to kind of revisit the original 100-plus-year statute and all the court jurisdictions that have followed to say, price has certainly been a historical point of view, but there are other questions. To what degree do these companies stifle innovation in terms of limiting new market entrants, or for some degree reducing the quality of service that we get? So we may pay nothing for it, but we get maybe in some cases a less than ideal service. So is there a way by which we revisit some of those core assumptions? The real hearing, in my opinion, is about two things. One, there's an inkling of bipartisan interest around some of these core regulatory issues, separate from the anti-conservative bias discussion. You heard members on the right and the left say, when we regulate this, as an example. So there is a perception that there's an inkling now of potential bipartisanship around certain policy issues around big tech. But secondly, the active investigations at the state attorneys general, FTC, and the Department of Justice may or may not have heard something new that could be added to the docket for them to investigate on those core judgments as to whether or not they have the authority today to revisit some of these definitions of harm.
Hey, Anish, Andrew and I were having a conversation earlier. I'm not sure if you heard it this morning, but just kind of digging into the idea of Facebook's acquisition of Instagram and questions that have been raised about that, and whether they were too big at the time, whether they were kind of pressuring them into agreeing to an acquisition. And Andrew brings up the good point that, look, just because the FTC signed off on it in the past doesn't necessarily mean that they can't undo what they had approved before. How likely do you think something like that is?
I don't see it particularly likely, but I do think there may be conditions that might enable more competition. So if you think about some of the big challenges of the internet economy, the pressure to kind of keep people within your network versus enabling them to more easily move around. If I could take my profile with me across competing platforms, then perhaps I might be able to more easily shop for alternatives. So there may be conditions that enable some of that increasing the potential for competition that I'd be looking for. I will say at the time, if you recall, many people were just aghast. I mean, I was out of government at the time, but it was just an unbelievable investment, a company of 17 people, north of $1 billion. And so, in hindsight, you could say, what an incredible smart move in terms of building up a new ecosystem. But at the time, I think it was seen as a very small business that the valuations were pretty high. So it's really easy to look backwards and say, gosh, this is generating harm. The only new thing is whether or not the motivation that led to the acquisition and some of the emails that were cited in the hearing are part of a docket that suggests that perhaps the old style rules about how you play fair in the industry do apply, even if the service is technically free. So maybe we heard something new in the public, but that had been known to the folks that have been pursuing these cases. So it wasn't really new to them, and we'd be getting the information anyway. But for the public, getting some of that in the boardroom-like feel did, I think, create some public awareness that there may be some areas that we need to dig a bit deeper on competition policy.